Same. Did you get a notification on Zoom yet?
Yeah, just okay, streaming on YouTube. Yeah, we're good.
Mute that on YouTube. Tweet out the link. Start recording on Zoom.
All right, we're now streaming live on YouTube.
We are live on YouTube, and now I'm going to start the podcast. All right, 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It's a historic day, Scott. We're streaming on YouTube live, so people can watch our faces live now, whether they like it or not. I am Rob Howe, joined as always by Scott Docterman. It is Thursday, September the 15th, a little bit before 9:30 a.m. Central Time. Got a lot to talk about today. We'll talk a lot of Hawkeyes. We'll even maybe preview the Nevada game a little bit there. I don't think we have to do a deep dive with the Wolf Pack. And we'll have our picks later in the week, and you'll want to listen to Scott because he's doing a lot better than I am in the picks. How are you doing, Scott? This is I don't want anybody to feel sorry for us, and they shouldn't feel sorry for us, but these are I don't even say trying because I think that's overly dramatic. It just these are the times where it makes our job more difficult, especially with social media. When you're posting things and then you just get the flood of negativity, no matter what it is that you post, whether it's positive or negative. So I'm hoping that the Hawkeyes can have something to feel good about this week, and the fan base will as well, because it's not really a fun time right now.
No, it isn't, and that's really the shame of it all, is because you look forward to college football for 8+ months a year from the bowl game on, and it's beautiful weather right now, and it should be the time to celebrate, and instead this is the worst possible scenario, I think, for Iowa, and that is that they're the laughing stock, and it's because of their offense, and that's just really difficult, I think, for most people to want to accept. But I think they're accepting it better than they maybe would, like Colin Cowherd making fun of their schedule or something like that, because this is self-inflicted. I mean, we've talked about this before, that they had a lot of issues going into this season, and a lot of things had to work right before they could actually improve, and none of them have worked so far. And so that's really an unfortunate part of this. But yeah, the negativity, the anger, the frustration is palpable. And sometimes we lose it. I mean, I lost it a little bit the other day because all I did was tweet out the kickoff time for Iowa Rutgers, because it was just announced or whatever at 6:00 on the 24th, and somebody's like, nobody's going to watch that game until Brian Ferentz is fired or something. I'm like, fine, don't watch. I don't give a shit, and it's true. I don't care. Why tweet that to me? Like I'm connected to the team or something. I mean, I'm just providing some information, and you're eating me alive. And so it's kind of I don't think anybody should feel sorry for us necessarily, but it's like, God, lighten up, Francis, a little bit. We're not the ones out there making these decisions. We're not the ones out there recruiting guys. We're not out the ones missing on the transfer portal or anything. We're reporting. And, everybody looks for somebody to blame, and we're the most easily accessible people. So we kind of get the brunt of it. Even if it's not directed at us, we're indirectly involved. And, you just kind of want something positive to happen, just so it kind of dissipates for a little while, because it's a long season. There are going to be other angst-ridden moments here coming up.
Yeah, and I just think the magnitude of how bad it's been offensively, Scott, is just kind of ratcheted up the rhetoric, so to speak. And I think there were, we questioned what this offense was going to be coming into this season after watching it in 2021. But we heard a lot from, the program that, things were going to be better, that changes were made, that John Budmeyer was better. And it's, streamlining, having Brian Ferentz as the quarterback coach, streamlines and the offensive coordinator as a streamline. And we've just hit historically bad offense. I mean, the worst offense in the country, literally by like 75 yards a game compared to, I think it's Colorado State, that the next school up there. I mean, it's at 2.6 yards per play. I mean, just historically bad. I don't think anybody saw this coming, which I think fuels that fire.
No kidding. And I think that the third leg of that stool or whatever is that not only is it bad and historically bad, it's that there's no change happening. I mean, that's what people want. It's like, hey, this isn't working. Let's do something different. And instead it's, no, we're going to stick to what we've got here. And that is probably the one thing where there is the biggest divide and disconnect, because if Kirk would have flipped in let's say the second half against Iowa State and went with Alex Padilla, or even this week and decided, you know what, I'm going to go with Alex Padilla as the starter, then I think that would lessen the anxiety a little bit, because everybody's already seen Spencer Petras. And I think in some ways he's, it's kind of like, hey, everybody's kind of moved on. It's time to move on. And yet, no, we're going to stick with this because it's not really his fault, even though part of it is. And, and it is historically bad. It's the worst by far in the country. And the other part is there's not one aspect that you can hang your hat on and say, yeah, but they run the ball okay. Maybe they'll just do that for a while until everything catches up to the injuries. Everybody's back from injury and whatever. No, there's none of that. The running game and is 127th in the country. Passing game, 127th in the country. Total offense, 131. I mean, scoring, 7 points a game and only 1 touchdown. All of those things just make you go, oh God, So that's where I think right now, and then the disconnect, whether it's just Kirk Ferentz or it's Kirk and his staff, is we're just going to wait things out and hope they get better. And I don't know if that's going to be the right strategy. And I know if that's not what fans want to hear.
Yeah, and we'll discuss the quarterback situation more. And I think what also, I'll use the word fuel again, also what is fueling the vitriol right now is the dynamic of the head coach hiring his son to be the offensive coordinator, and now they're in a corner. And are they painted in that corner, and how can they get out of that corner?
That's a great question. The issue, it's kind of chicken and the egg for me on this. How much of it is Brian and how much of it is Kirk? And I would say that for the first time, I'm kind of more in the this is on Kirk than Brian, because Brian's doing a lot of what Kirk wants him to do. The quarterback decision, let's not kid ourselves, it would be different if Brian Ferentz was the one making the call. And, the nepotism discussion, yeah, I think that's certainly valid, because you're talking about a state employee who makes $900,000 a year, being hired by his father, and his performance, or the offense's performance, the performance that he's in charge of, last year didn't live up to anything. So therefore, most places would make a change. Iowa chose not to. Iowa doubled down. And then this year, I kind of said, look, it's kind of like a race car driver who finished like second to last in a race all last year, driving for his father. And then the next year, he's like driving in a freaking rainstorm, and everybody else has sunshine, and it's like, you don't know if he still sucks, because all the other elements make it so difficult to know whether it's his fault or somebody else's. And I think that's where Iowa is. I think that's where Brian is. I mean, the howling is at a palpable level, probably the loudest I've ever heard it. But it's also like, is it fair now to judge Brian when he is so limited? I mean, they haven't even had a 3-receiver formation yet this year. And that was their primary formation the last 3 years, was a 3 wide receiver set. So, so it's almost unfair to judge him based on what the offense can't do, but he's the one in charge, and the buck stops with him. And like you said, and the buck stops with Kirk Ferentz. And But this all just goes back to what they didn't do in the offseason. They had the opportunity. Everybody was pushing for them. This didn't just come out of thin air. The injuries, yes, but not the problems. And then the problems just fell off a cliff this year.
Yeah, to your point, I was thinking about this within the last few days. If you think about the most criticized coaches during Kirk Ferentz's tenure here, Ken O'Keefe,
Mhm.
who basically by the end, people were ready to go, and it was a celebration when he left.
Yeah.
Greg Davis, same thing, and now Brian Ferentz. Those are three different people, but there's one common denominator.
Yeah.
And it's not that there hasn't been success with what Kirk wants to do offensively and within the parameters of his philosophies, but it's restrictive, and it's still restrictive. And I don't think it changes until he loosens up a little bit. But the situation they're in now, I'm not sure how much they can do based on the offensive line needing to mature and develop. That's going to take time. The receiver group getting healthy and getting on the same page and getting back up to speed. This is all going to take time, and we just don't know how long it's going to take. But in the macro view, offensively, they need to change, and that's up to the head coach.
You're right. Absolutely, you're right. I think right now that has to be on the table for Kirk Ferentz unless he doesn't want to coach anymore, because he just can't live this way. You can live a complementary football style without holding yourself down to the point where, punting is winning has always kind of been a kind of a joke in some ways, and it's true. There is some truth to it, but the way that they play, they have to adapt. They just have to. They just can't play like this anymore. And somebody asked me in my mailbag, which I published today, what would I like to see out of Iowa's offense? And I said pretty much a mix of what Minnesota does and what Iowa does. I like the running game aspect that Minnesota does. I like the zone run or zone blocking scheme Iowa does when they're good enough to do it. But I also like zone read. I like having the ability to have a quarterback who can take the ball and run with it when either needed or wanted. And then finally, come on, man, wide receivers are like basketball players. Get the ball in their hands. And if you get the ball in their hands, they're going to want to play for you. And if you don't, and if it's Charlie Jones getting 37 targets over 14 games, they're going to want to go somewhere else where they can get like 21 catches in 2 games. So I think right now that they have to assess it. Kirk really should, in my eyes, the best thing for him, if he's willing to do it, is be a figurehead. Go ahead and say, I demand that we block this way. But then the next coordinator, whether it's Brian or anybody else, can have free reign on how you decide to do things. I will kind of take charge of game management in certain areas, like, hey, we got to slow this down. We got to run the ball a little bit more or speed it up. I'll call 4th downs, all that stuff. But overall, when it comes to offensive football, he's out of his element. 20 years ago, he was in it. But what we remember was 20 years ago, everybody ran a 4-3, had a 250-pound sledgehammer at linebacker. And so Iowa's style worked. Everybody else has changed except Iowa. And they don't have enough access to athletes to where you would have to completely infuse this system to make it look like it was anything like 2002. And even then, I don't think it's 2002 offense would work like it did back then.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think anybody is calling for Mike Leach, the air raider, because I don't think that works with the defense. And again, it is complementary, but the offense isn't complementing anything right now. And you make a great point. I like Minnesota, what Minnesota does. I like what Chris Kleiman does at Kansas State. Even South Dakota State and North Dakota State, they're not throwing the ball all over the place. They're very balanced offenses, but there's some ingenuity there. There's some creativity there. There's not just the defenses don't know exactly what's coming at them. And that's the case with Iowa right now. And again, it's compounded by the things we talked about earlier, the offensive line development and the wide receivers and the quarterback play and yada yada. But overall, again, macro is what Scott and I are talking about. The philosophy itself needs to change.
Mhm. And, if there's one aspect that I'm probably most disappointed in this year, it's the offensive line development. I think it is not good. And I'm not sure how many people listen to it. I was told about it because I work with one of the people. But yesterday, Jacob Hester was on Andy Staples' radio show on Sirius XM and talked about how every single snap Iowa's line has a tell. And before, everybody has a little bit of a tell, but in their case, it's just so obvious that the way that they're set up really light when they're going to move, and they're set up really heavy when they're going to go straight forward. And the tight ends are looking at their zone for to how to block. They've only run 6 counters, and the rest are zone running plays. So you've got a combination of very, very predictable play calling, which at this point you're so limited that everything's predictable. But then the lack of development, and then the lack of either self-scouting or just understanding what you're doing is, to me, very, very troubling. And I'm not calling for anybody's job yet, but I would say that having a year over year, I expected Iowa to be able to run block, especially run block, much, much better than what it is. And I understand that most of the teams, Iowa State in particular, was like, we're loading everything. We're not going to let them run on us. And outside the first 2 plays, they didn't. But then you still got to do it. You still got to get some of those runs, because you're going to have to break up make them pay down the field. But you can't do that if you can't run the ball. And I think right now, some heat needs to be applied to George Barnett. Maybe it is internally, but I think if it wasn't for the quarterbacks and the overall just horrific offensive numbers, I think the spotlight would be on George Barnett at this point.
Yeah, it's so much easier to see, like, when Spencer overthrows or underthrows somebody than it is when there are mistakes on the offensive line to the average fan. But you can tell, even if you're only a novice, if you're looking, you can tell that the offensive line it's been bad enough where you can tell it's not playing well. And unless that development, I mean, it took to what, the bowl game last year before they really hit their stride. That's got to happen this year much quicker if they want to get something out of this season. And I don't know if personnel changes is if that's the answer, or you just stick with the guys you have and hope they get it. And had a good conversation with Logan Jones the other day. I wrote a story for Hawk Fanatic that'll come out some point either today or tomorrow. But he admitted, that he was really nervous and anxious that first game playing, and just that overrode anything that he was supposed to do fundamentally, and that's not to be unexpected. This is a guy that a year ago at this time was playing defensive line, and he was hurt too. He wasn't even on the field. You throw him out there in front of 70,000. You kind of get that. You move Connor Colby from inside to out. There's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there. You're moving Nick DeYoung inside. You've got new guys at left guard. I get it. There's going to be growing pains, but it should be better than this.
Another aspect is I went through their recruiting in 18 and 19, and it's a scorched earth.
Yeah.
When you look at that, I mean, you've got basically, Linderbaum aside, because he was recruited as a D lineman, they had 7 guys. 3 have landed on the depth chart out of those 7 guys. One retired, Cody Ince, who would be the best lineman by far and away. Justin Britt has been constantly hurt because of his knee. He got hurt in high school, probably got played earlier than he should have at Iowa. They should have just redshirted him for the first year instead of throwing him out there, but the guards were terrible in 2019. And then Jack Plum, who isn't starting right now. He's the third tackle, and that's all you got out of your two oldest classes. So for a guy like a Logan Jones or even Connor Colby moving positions, and normally you'd have two, maybe even three guys who are like seniors or juniors who've played for a couple of years that will be able to kind of calm them down, provide leadership. Hey, everything's all right. Just think about this. Just do this. I was here. I did this. They're all in the same boat. I mean, Richmond and Colby played last year, but they're only sophomores. That was their first year playing. So I think that the lack of leadership and experience up front is huge in this. And so, but it does shine a light on development, and it shines a light on, recruiting and retention, because, when you have guys like Ezra Miller, Noah Fensky, and a few others that leave and go somewhere else, and, you really put yourself in a tough spot. Tyler Andrews hasn't cracked the depth chart. You've got to, it makes it very difficult.
Yeah. And it's kind of, as you say, you when you have attrition at a position, and we've seen this at receiver too. It's the two hot spots right now on the hot spot are our receiver and offensive line, and I think there's parallels there between the recruiting and development at both spots.
Right, and the thing is, the sad part is that they when you think about offensive line and you think about who else is on the staff in Brian Ferentz and Kirk Ferentz, that Kirk is considered a guru. Let's not get ourselves one of the best that's ever done it. And Brian is really good too. That is his forte in my eyes, is offensive line and development. The way that they played under him, for 5 years was really at a high level. And that I think that largely, they need to be in, either in charge. I'm sure they're really lending their advice, but to some extent right now they are just it's inexcusable, frankly. They need to be better than what they are. And if that's because George Barnett's not up to the task, well, I don't think Reese Morgan would say no if you asked him to come back to coach the rest of the season, even though it's been a while since he coached O-line, but he knows what he's doing there. And then, or, move John Budmeyer up and move Brian over. I know I'm grasping at straws just like everybody else, but I think at some point you've got to make sure that if the offensive line doesn't stabilize, then whatever we're talking about at quarterback, wide receiver, running back, it doesn't matter, because they're going to because you look at the teams that they're going to play, they're all going to just vaporize them. I mean, Michigan, Ohio State, Illinois will, Minnesota will, all of them. Rutgers will. This week won't, but the rest of the season they will if they don't get better.
Yes. It all starts up front. It's a cliche for a reason, because it's true. And we'll see what happens. We'll see how quickly these guys can mature and develop, because that's going to be the key to where this season goes. But it's not just them. It's the receivers. Will Nico Reganey and Keegan Johnson be able to come back and provide some spark? But the quarterback play needs to be better as well. How much is that related to the offensive line and the inability to run the football? It's all connected. It's all kind of how you make the stew. But the quarterback is the position that is most recognizable in terms of the play. People don't. Again, the novice fan's not going to say, well, this guy wasn't blocked right, or this guy didn't run the right route at that time. We're seeing certain signs and certain deficiencies with Spencer Petras right now that are solely on him. There's plenty of things that are affecting his play, but having time to throw and not making completing a simple 5-yard out, that can't happen. So what do we do here? Well, Kirk Ferentz is sticking with Spencer Petras this week against Nevada. It's an interesting point in time, Scott, because you can look at this a couple ways. I kind of like doing it this way, this is just me personally. I'll be interested to hear your opinion. I think you put Spencer Petras out there this week. If he hits the ground running and looks great, wonderful. You've shown you give him some confidence. You have him still locked into you know what he wants to do, and maybe can build on it. I think if you bench him going into the game and then you put Alex Padilla in there and he struggles, now you've lost two guys. At least if Petras goes out there and maybe, and I can see a couple different scenarios. Maybe you let Petras play the first half and he plays well, great. And then give Padilla the second half and see how he does, just to get him acclimated and get him some run and prepare him in case you start Petras at Rutgers and it just reverts back to what we saw the first 2 weeks. Then you can go to Padilla. There's a lot of ways to play this here. I kind of like starting Petras in this game just for what I mentioned before. If you put Padilla in and maybe he struggles, then you're maybe in two quarterbacks' heads. But what do you think? It's a lot there. I mean, there's really no easy answer.
Right. I guess I understand. I'm probably side more with, let's just try something else. And part of it is,
I can see that. I can definitely see that angle too.
And it's more because I've seen him miss too many makeable passes.
Yeah.
And that's been the problem for me. And really last week wasn't as bad. This week the first week was just horrendous. I mean, there were 8 passes I thought in the first game that I'm like, no, you cannot miss that pass. And then, of course, he had the interception right before half against Iowa State. That was just, and he said this week that his two areas that he really needs to improve on are timing and footwork. And, his footwork's never been there, ever. And at this point,
and that's a little alarming at this point.
Yeah. As much as he works on it, he works religiously on his fundamentals. Nobody works harder than Spencer Petras. I will give him platitudes all day and night on that, but it's like, come on, man. You're 1-1, but it feels like you're 0-8. I mean, it's just, this is the kind of season where you're having, and it's like, at this stage with Alex Padilla, what do you have? He's a 4th-year junior who he played. Did he play well last year in spurts? He did. But, with Petras over the last, 10 games, 8 of which he played in, he's thrown 1 touchdown and 9 interceptions. Padilla had 2 and 2. Each of them have led 6 touchdown drives over the same span, but the number of plays and games and series that Petras has had has just been way more than what Padilla has had. So I kind of lean that way. I understand the rationale that, hey, everything is so bad here that we'd at least rather have a guy who knows to, for the most part, throw the ball away and punt, rather than somebody's going to try to do too much and get us in a really, bad situation. But you can't think that way every time. You can't be that risk averse when you're in game 3. Last year you could down the stretch because you had something to play for. Now you've got, and something to possess, I should say. That now you've got something to play for. You got the whole season in front of you. If you don't have somebody playing at a semi-high level, I mean, Michigan and Ohio State are top 5 teams. They'll roll you, and I didn't think twice about it. So I think at this point, I would go that direction. I understand the rationale though, and it's just, I think again, probably the fan side of everybody is just do something different. And that's from scheme to, they haven't tried Wildcat since early last year. They've only ran 3 jet sweeps all year, and one of them was a pass. They don't have the personnel to do it very well, but it's like, you're not trying anything different, and it's more blasé than ever before. So I totally get the anger and vitriol over status quo.
Yeah, and so do I. And I should also mention, I would have tried Padilla already.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the position they're in right now. I kind of see this as the best path, but it's certainly not a given. And I can certainly see this not going well. But I would have tried I would have tried Alex already. I don't know what he looks like in practice. That's kind of I don't know. That's kind of Kirk's out that we can't see practice, although we would be willing to see practice to evaluate the quarterbacks, and they do. What we have to go on is what Padilla did last year. Looked pretty good against Northwestern in spurts. I think he was 11 of 26 for 200 plus, and a couple touchdowns against Minnesota, if I remember right. And I looked these stats up the other day, and I think he threw for 83 yards against Illinois.
Now that one was not all his fault.
Yep, I agree.
I went through that one, and when I did my series with Brian, that was one where we talked about it over the phone, because I said this was one that I'd like to talk about. And I said, after rewatching this game, I thought, this one's not on you. Yeah. You got to, there were two aspects. One, there were 6 drop passes. And 2, that was probably, even though Tyler had like 130 or 140 yards or something like that, that was not one of his better games, because he was constantly dancing when he should have been just putting his head down a few times. And he's like, by the middle of the third quarter, I just threw up my hands and I said, I don't know what the hell to do anymore, because people are dropping every fucking pass. Or sorry, every pass
live on YouTube.
Yeah, I guess I'm using some Brianisms here, and because he has a lot of blame. No, I'm not going to absolve him of this, but when receivers drop 6 passes, you can't blame the quarterback, and you can't blame the offensive coordinator for that. You got to blame the receivers for not catching the ball, and they were catchable passes. They weren't just like, hey, they touched his hand when they're a foot and a half behind him or whatever when he's running full speed. So that's, I guess I give Alex Padilla a little bit of a pass. Now, here's a scenario I want you to see what your opinion is. If, let's say, Spencer really struggles again. Let's say he starts out 2 for 6 with an interception, and it's late in the second quarter, everybody's booing. They decide, all right, enough's enough. We're going to go with Padilla in the second half. At that point, what I would do is I would drop him to third team, because I'd want to see, all right, it's time to get Labus in the Army and put him at second team and Padilla at first team, because you got to see what you got at that position, and with Petrus, he could step in a tough spot. Like, let's say Padilla plays pretty well, but they've got a 3-point lead and midway through the fourth quarter against Michigan at home. Then, okay, you could vault Petrus over and say, hey, the situation's dictating. But otherwise, I want to see what you have going into next year, because if you don't know what Petrus can, or Padilla certainly, but Labus can do, then I'm kind of like, you got to know if you need to hit the portal or not. What do you think?
Yeah, and if you remember, I know you do. In 2008, when Christensen got benched for Stanzi, Christensen had to come in against Iowa State and to win that game. Yeah. So that's a scenario where we have some history. It's way back and only a little bit, but it certainly makes sense. I know I don't need to say this, and people don't care. There's not a more likable guy that I've covered at quarterback than Spencer Petras, and I think you'd probably agree with me.
Absolutely, 100%.
This day and age of football, you don't need a dual threat guy. You have to have a mobile quarterback. You have to have a guy that can move the pocket and play off schedule, and because defenses are just so fast. And I think Padilla's certainly a step above where Spencer is in terms of mobility, and Labus is a step above that. So, but then I also wonder, Scott, how much would they cater the offense to that ability of those two guys? How much flexibility is there, going back to the beginning of this conversation with the man who runs this thing? How much is he willing to adjust?
Well, one thing that I did see in the spring that I liked was they ran different types of plays for when Spencer was in and when Alex
Yes.
was in and when
Good
Joey
point.
Levis was in, that they were moving more on the perimeter. There were more bootlegs, there were more rollouts and things like that, which enabled him to get his feet out and do the right thing. And so I guess I think overall that wasn't, they would do more of that. And again, once you get the wide receivers back, then you can expand that offense and, get, it sounds like, listening last night to Kirk Ferentz, Brody Brecht's on a, pretty good track now. He'll be able to seize more snaps. That Nico Reganey is very, very close. He and Keegan have practiced all week. Keegan, just because he hasn't really done anything since the bowl prep, won't be there. But so I could see them adapting some of it. That doesn't mean they're going to call a bunch of zone read runs for Alex Padilla, maybe latest, but I think it's that would be the path that I would expect if he was in there, that they would not just straight drop back a lot, that they would actually move him more, move the pocket, and probably take some pressure off the offensive line and pass blocking, just because then he has an opportunity to get wide, narrow the field, and if he needs to run, he can run.
It's an intriguing week because of the scenarios that we've talked about. If Spencer goes out there and just is money and this offense just kind of clicks and they play him the whole game, then where are they? Does that mean it's going to happen against Rutgers? We're not going to deep dive into Nevada, but Nevada gave up 616 yards and 8.9 yards per play to Incarnate Word. Yeah. So if Iowa can't show some signs of life on offense, that is not a good foreshadowing for the rest of the season.
No, this has to be their breakout game. This is the worst opponent on their schedule. Way worse than South Dakota State. I mean, they beat New Mexico State, who got trucked up in Gopher land, and I think the Gophers were
roadkill.
Yeah, right. I love that. Yes. Way to go on that one. Roadkill. I love it. But no, I mean, they were, and I think they took it easy on them because of Jericho, so yeah. I think this is one where get your running game going, get some passes in. If Brody Brecht is there, if Nico Reganey was there, certainly, but if Brody could
How much do you play those guys?
I would try to play Nico's 20, 25 snaps,
okay,
something like that. I mean, I would still lean really, really hard on your two tight ends, but I would try to keep. Look, and this is the one, indirect aspect of it. Having Laporta out wide really negates much that he can do. I mean, he just isn't. He's a good tight end. I think he's an NFL tight end, and I think he's a guy who's probably third round draft pick or something like that. But
I agree with you. I thought. Iowa State put a corner on him and just neutralized him.
Yeah. Because you got to body him up and, or in his case, he's got to use his body against a corner, and whether it just, that's a lot to ask of a tight end to do that against a corner when you're running routes. Now, if you want to run that direction, he'll bury him right in the ground. But, it's really hard unless you're on the goal line to make that situation work. I think Noah Fant would have been the only one that I can remember in recent years. Maybe George Kittle, when he was healthy, that could do something like that. I mean, Kittle now, of course, could, but but that's taken away his effectiveness because he's better, in line, and they can kind of work their running game better. So I hope if Brody Brecht gets in there, I want to see a deep pass, because that's Spencer's best forte, is just launching the damn thing, and And Brody's best move right now is, outrun the coverage. And if he can do that, if they could connect on like a 60-yard pass for a touchdown and a night crowd at Kinnick, and it's early in the game, that place will be set off and the boos will be out. And it'll be boos with a Z-E instead of an S.
And he's the Brandon Smith body type. Yeah. Not saying has that athleticism, but he brings something that they haven't had so far this season, and he's a different animal in that room that can kind of potentially create some mismatches.
And the thing is, you really need more guys out there so you can limit Arlen Bruce, because you're expecting him to take all these snaps plus return punts, and you're exposing him to injury when you're doing that. Not that that's the only reason, because you want your best players out there, but sometimes he needs a breath or two, play off, and you're not giving it to him. And if you can get Reganey back and Brecht back, and maybe Keegan Johnson by Rutgers or Michigan, then maybe you can look at them all and go, okay, you can start rotating, maybe put on some 3 receiver sets, keep the tight ends inside. Sprinkle in an Alec Wick once in a while, but don't force anything. Then you become a little bit more balanced. You have a little bit better opportunity to move the ball. I'm not going to suggest they're going to be some juggernaut or anything like that, but just give your defense a rest, because there are going to be teams. I mean, last week I would say that the 99 play drive or 99-yard drive felt like 99 plays. 99 play drive.
Yeah, they converted 98 third downs, I think. On that
It felt like it. It's like 5. I mean, it was a tremendous drive. But, that was the result of Iowa's defense already being out there for so long.
Gassed, man. They were gassed.
And Iowa State, credit to them. Great drive. Absolutely tip your cap to them.
And Xavier Hutchinson was the best player on the field.
Yeah, right. He made plays, and in the end zone, whether Riley slipped, they got tangled up a little bit. Doesn't matter. It didn't get called. So, and then there was there were a couple of question marks, but you know what? You don't worry about that stuff. And I think if the offense would have been able to, if Monty Potamon doesn't fumble, then that's just a touchdown. And it's just one touchdown that they've allowed all year. So you got to, so this all kind of comes back to the
goofy
same thing.
Game, man.
Yeah.
I mean, Iowa State turns it over twice going into the end zone, pick and a fumble. Iowa fumbles at the goal line. There was the out of bounds catch that was, I thought should have been reviewed. That wasn't. There was the Cooper DeJean personal foul that I didn't agree with. The Riley Moss one, Xavier Hutchinson, to me, that's a toss up. I can see that one. I would say probably close to 50-50. That's called one way or the other. And actually, probably less than that, because most of the time they just let them play, unless it's something egregious.
Yeah, and most of the time, if it's the defender falling down, then they won't call it. If it's the offensive player falling down, they'll call it about every time. And even then, oh well, that stuff happens, So, I'm not taking away anything from that defense. Two blocked punts. You've got to do more offensively. That is a game where, and I'm sure this will haunt Kirk, depending, especially if they get this offense turned around a little bit, even, is that this is one of those games that'll keep them up late at night, thinking, damn, there's no way Iowa State has 2 end zone turnovers and 2 blocked punts and wins the game at Kinnick Stadium against that defense and that special teams unit. There's just no way. Well, when your offense is playing that poorly, there is a way. And Jarrell Brock got smacked by Kayvon Merriweather. Great tackle. Forcing the fumble at the goal line, and I guess it kind of hit more of his own player at the same time too. But still, that's what happens. But Potabom, if that would have been called a touchdown on the field, it would have stayed a touchdown.
It was so close.
Right. I mean, I thought it was a touchdown, but then again, hey, that's.
I thought it was a fumble, so that shows you right there. That's how close it was.
Exactly. So you let the officials call it on the field, and yes, I do think that the third down, that catch on the sideline, that absolutely should have been reviewed. And I'm still really surprised looking back that took place, and and then the hurry up part of it. That's where in the Big Ten, and Kirk brought it up yesterday too, is in the Big Ten that would have been called a that would have been whistled really quick, and in the Big 12 apparently it isn't. And I thought there were some spots that were bad, probably more in favor of Iowa State, but I'm not gonna. That's neither here nor there. But it was a weird crew, and it was a weird game. I see Carl Jackson is going to be the honorary captain.
Nice. We talked about this a lot in the offseason, Scott, that a game would come down to a kick. And probably more than one game. And it may not just be the end of the game, but within the game, important kicks. Aaron Blum's 1 for 3 now. The last kick was in the rain. The conditions weren't great. You got to give him a little bit of a cut them a little slack there. I'm just wondering where they are at that point, because we're at a, I think it's even more magnified now that Iowa's going to be playing a lot of close games. Hopefully they'll stay close. The defense and special teams will keep it close, that these kicks are going to matter even more. I'm wondering where that competition is right now, and you know, how confident they are that Aaron's going to go out there and hit the next one.
I'm there with you. The other day, I'm not going to criticize him for missing a 48-yard field goal from the right hash mark in the pouring down rain. It was just a downpour. It sucked. I was standing out there stupidly doing it, and I was drenched for the rest. I mean, for like the next 5 hours. But it was, when you're 1 for 3, you missed one in the first game, missed a very important one in the second game. And I'm not, Keith Duncan's made those types of field goals, but I'm not going to compare somebody out there for their first big game to Keith Duncan. But I'll say this, that, it was makeable. Yes, it was difficult. It was probably, it's beyond criticism, but it's a competition. And now you're starting to go, okay, is he better than the other guy? Is he better than Drew Stevens? And they kind of gave Drew Stevens the, hey, okay, you're going to kick off. But you wonder where this is going to end up, because there are going to be other games where you're, in this team, a field goal in the second quarter is going to be big. And if you miss they have actually they haven't put together a good drive yet, or one that's ended in points yet of a decent drive. But if they put one together and they get inside the 15 and the drive stalls and he misses a 33-yarder or something like that, then you probably do need to look at the other guy.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think that the miss at the end of Iowa State is something that you can jump all over him about. I just think it, like you said, I think it keeps the competition open. I think it keeps okay, if he misses another one, it's that body of work that you want to focus on, and you it keeps things. If he would have made, if he's 3 for 3 right now, we're not having this discussion. He's 1 for 3. So I think you wonder about that next time and how close the competition is. Similar to quarterback, how close the competition is, how long is the leash, so to speak, since we're throwing out all these cliches. But it's something to keep an eye on, for no question about that.
Yeah, and really, it's, you think about it, the difference between kicker and quarterback at this point is the quarterback has a lot of equity in the bank. He's been a starter for a couple of years, and everybody knows, as you said with Spencer, impeccable character, really represents himself well, is a true leader, works hard, the kind of guy who can go out and drink with the boys, but also you want to put him in front of the community. He's perfect there too. I think knows the game inside and out. So all those qualities have given him a longer leash, per se. There's no equity built up in the kicking room. They're just right now, competing, and Aaron Blum's 1 for 3. I'd like to see him get a couple more opportunities. Not that you want 4 field goal efforts like Duncan and Shudak have had recently, but you want to see him get, all right, here's a 34-yarder, here's a 23-yarder if you need it, and maybe God forbid, a couple extra point opportunities. Then that way you can kind of make a decision that's based on, because they're gonna have a lot of games where it's going to come down to a field goal here or a field goal there.
Yes, if Richard Dreyfuss was in charge of fixing the Iowa offense or helping the Iowa offense, he would give the baby steps book out. And what about Bob reference? We're old here, so we're going to make old references, but that's kind of it. And if you can get some drives that get you some field goals, that's the first step. And then, we need to kind of take this one step at a time. And to your point, Scott, I think there are going to be opportunities even this week for Aaron Blum to get out there and show, grab the job, or it stays open.
Yeah. I would have probably used, we're going to need a bigger boat.
Also, Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to go with the talking about the offense and its issues. But
A much
yeah,
bigger boat.
and probably the Jaws itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be a big week, I think, for them because if he can, they're playing an opponent where they should drive the ball, and if they
They should
can't,
run the ball.
yeah, they should run the ball. They should have some big plays. They should have a few touchdowns, yay, and then maybe a few field goals to go along with it. And at that point, you go, all right, this is your chance, Aaron Blum. If you're 3 for 3, because the weather should be okay, then all's well. But if not, if he's, let's say, 2 for 4, and one of them's a decent 43-yarder, another one's a good, but he's missed a couple, then I think you really got to look at flipping, because you got a road game at Rutgers at night, Michigan at home, and then you're going to Illinois. I mean, so there's a lot there.
Defensively, another good performance by Iowa, other than the gas that was, the tank was empty on the 99-yard drive, and Iowa State made some plays, and we talked about some of the, questionable plays and things that could have been reviewed maybe, or things like that. But first week without Justin Jacobs, I noticed linebacker on wide receiver got once, and that got switched real quick.
Yeah.
Flashback to the what year was that? Where Klinkenborg was on covering a receiver down the field at Ames.
Philip Bates, 2007.
Yeah. I think there were flashbacks there where the Iowa coaches were like, "Nope, we're not doing this." So he's a big piece out of out of the defense that you really want to get back as sooner rather than later. But I think Iowa can lean on some cash a little bit more. Tough news with Jamari Harris too, because you're losing a guy that can, because you've got the flexibility of Cooper DeJean and Terry Roberts. Now one of those has to play cornerback.
Yeah.
And the other one's a cash. So you're dealing with depth there. But I think, just finishing the thought on the defense, the offense needs to help a little bit more to keep the defense fresh. If it does, the defense is fine.
Yeah. I have very little concern about the defense. I think if anything, you would like to see Justin Jacobs be back by the time they play Michigan.
Yeah.
He's not going to play this week. Probably doubtful, I would say, for Rutgers, but Cooper DeJean had an awesome game the other day, and had 11 tackles, had an interception in the end zone, had I know some people thought it was a questionable roughing play on the edge there. That's probably so close that you probably shouldn't do it, not in today's era, and he'll learn, he'll understand. But that said, I thought he was terrific. I think he could play that cash role, and I don't know that they should deviate much from it, except in third and short and goal line type situations anyway, because I think they're so good there. The Jamari Harris one is tough, but if you keep your corners healthy, it's not going to matter, because Terry Roberts has played really well, and it killed him to fall down. When he intercepted that pass, it almost was like he missed it because he was so disappointed, because if he keeps his feet, he probably scores.
Yep.
And what a way that would be to win the Cy-Hawk, right? So I think they're in an okay situation. And then now, if you get past those two, what do you do? What happens if somebody is down for a series, a quarter, a game? Is it, do you move Cooper there and somebody else like Sebastian Castro plays cash, or do you move like Brennan Diaz-Fernandez in to play corner for non-cash or with cash situations? That's why Phil Parker's the wizard that he is. So
yeah, they still have enough pieces there. I mean, I think Castro's he would probably be starting on a lot of defenses.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I certainly, and Diaz Fernandez is kind of slowly built up and developed, and I think he's probably ready if given the opportunity, much like Jamari was last year. So I think they're okay there. You start losing guys, and then you're like it becomes the depth is something that programs like Iowa usually don't have a ton of compared to Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State. The blue blood programs have more depth. So then you just want to keep an eye on that as a potential landmine.
Sure. Yeah. And last year, it didn't look like it was going to be a problem until it became a problem. When Riley Moss got hurt against Penn State, and then Terry Roberts got hurt after that, then Matt Hankins got hurt, and they're able to bring back Riley, but he wasn't as good as what we saw. And then but Jamari Harris stepped in after Roberts got hurt, had 4 interceptions, a really good year. If there's one little shining bright spot out of it is he can redshirt. He didn't redshirt before, so you redshirt him this year, and then next year he comes in, and it'll probably be him. And I wouldn't be surprised if Roberts returns. I don't know that he's got an NFL pedigree right now, resume, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was those two. And then TJ Hall has also been looking pretty good, and as we've seen in the past, they're not afraid to play a true freshman at corner, and it's worked out for them when they've done that.
Another storyline that we talked a lot about coming into the season was the Quinn Schulte, Xavier Wonkba dynamic. I think Quinn Schulte's answered a lot of questions.
He's been outstanding.
Yes.
The first game he had 4 breakups, and they were big time hits. They were dislodging the ball, and so again, we all kind of wonder and criticize and what have you. And I don't know that anybody, any of us necessarily criticized Quinn Schulte other than kind of the coincidence that, all right, here's another in-state safety from a parochial school who's a walk-on who is starting again. But, Jake Gervais is still in the league, earned a Super Bowl ring. Jack Kerner should be on a team. He's not yet, but last year he had the most solo tackles for an Iowa DB since Bob Sanders. So he was a quality starter. And then, of course, now you look at Quinn Schulte and the way he's played. There's no question he's there. And I guess I look at it as next year, Kayvon probably goes to the league, and that's where Xavier Wonkba will end up playing.
Yeah, and a lot of depth in that back end there as well from the safety position. They've got some good guys on the roster that are working behind some guys that are playing really well right now. Kayvon, I think, has taken the next step so far this year. I think he's really solid. He had some breakdowns at times last year, but he's been pretty solid through 2 games.
Yeah, he has. And you know what? He's really stepped up as the vocal leader, maybe, certainly at the back end, I think. And, to his credit, all the things he's done. And we recognized it last year, with the inaugural Duke Slater Award, because we just felt that he was, emblematic of what we like, in just dealing with people. It doesn't have to be good or bad. It's just how you deal with them. And then to see him, be a team captain, to see him, I watched a little bit last night, the trip to Selma and Montgomery and just the way he's really taken leadership responsibilities on defense. It's, he's becoming that really good story, but he might be playing at a recognizable level for the Big Ten.
I'd say Spencer Petras has a good argument for the second Duke Slater Award so far this year. The kid comes out, I will say, he comes out and answers every question every week and does it politely and thoughtfully. And I still have, and I know this has been this way since Kirk got here, but I still think there's some inequity in the quarterback having to answer questions every week and the offensive coordinator not having to answer questions every week. I think there's some inequity there, but I give Spencer a lot of credit for how he handles himself.
I'm there with you on that. It would be good. And good times and bad. One thing I remember when I was with the Gazette and I covered a few Michigan State. I would go to their press conferences, and a lot of times D'Antonio would have his coordinators come in, and it would be very, very quick. There'll only be a couple of questions. They kind of give a quick synopsis, and hey, what happened here? What did you see? And then, Pat Narduzzi at the time would say, hey, it looked like Danico Allen got leg whipped by Matt Tobin when Mark Weisman scored a touchdown. As well, it doesn't surprise me that happened, playing Iowa, that kind of stuff.
I think does Iowa State have its coordinators available via Zoom each week?
They are available. Yeah. I can't remember. Sometimes they were in person before. It's been, but yes, for the most part, they are. It's very quick.
It doesn't have to be a lot, man. It doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit, because almost every game there's a question or call where you're wondering what the coordinator was thinking.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think that it's the same thing to me with the head official of every game.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess I'm a pool reporter. I probably should have asked about the play on the sidelines, and at least gotten some sort of account of why and what you see. But I think I would agree that I think the offensive coordinator probably more than the defensive coordinator, but I think both of them, because it's a play calling issue. So yeah, I think that would be a good thing, because it's always tough when the unpaid student athlete has to take all the bullets, whereas the offensive coordinator who's now making $900K doesn't have to.
Yeah, and it was particularly uncomfortable this week when Spencer was basically the one who let us know that he was starting this week.
Yeah, right. When he says it's business as usual, and you're like, okay,
Yeah. And Kirk could say, well, that's what it showed on the depth chart, but that depth chart I wouldn't wipe. But because it's just not very accurate.
Right. Every week it's been wrong, and I'm not going to blame the SIDs, Steve Rowe or anybody for it. That is what he's given, and so you don't know. And Kirk always makes fun of the depth chart.
Yeah, I know. He's the one who discredits it more than anybody.
Yeah, he's like, oh, is that what it says on there? Things like that. And so it's hard for us to take it seriously. Fans take it way more seriously, especially like in the spring and then Big Ten Media Days. They take it way seriously. But, so it's hard to read into it. And then, and last year I thought he was just going to try to be coy this week, because I don't know what you heard, but I heard a lot of whispers or a few people talking that usually are pretty accurate, saying it was going to be Alex this week. So that was a little bit of a surprise that they went that route for me.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I think you probably agree with me that there's a bit of a power struggle going on right now with this decision.
Yeah, absolutely, wholeheartedly. I think there's a lot of dissension, and I think if that continues, it's going to get more and more extreme. And you don't expect unanimity when it comes to controversial decisions like this, but there's a pecking order and everybody's going to follow it. But if there could be some I told you so moments, one way or the other. And Lord knows if Spencer has a really good game, Kirk's going to let every one of us know about